Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Welcome to my channel Science of Life with Dr. Mohammed Yusuf. Today I am going to discuss or start discussion of the long-term control of blood pressure. But before that, one ayah from Holy Quran, Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ والقناطير المقنطرة من الذهب والفضة والخيل المسومة والأنعام والحرث ذلك متاع الحياة الدنيا والله عنده حسن المآب. ज़ुय्यिन लिन्नास, लोगों के लिए खूबसूरत बना दी गई, ये काम लोगों को अच्छा बना दिया गया, लोगों के ज़हन में ये डाल दिया गया, उनकी फितरत में डाल दिया गया। ये अल्लाह पाक का फाइल तो अल्लाह पाक होंगे करने वाले, कि लोगों के दिलों में ये बात मुज़य्यन कर दी गई। किस चीज़ की? हुब्बुश शहवात मिनन निसाए, मरगूब चीज़ों की मोहब्बत लोगों के लिए मुज़य्यन कर दी गई। कौन कौन सी चीज़ों की मोहब्बत अल्लाह पाक कह रहे हैं कि लोगों के दिलों में डाल दी गई? वो है औरतें, औरत की मोहब्बत हर इंसान की फितरत बन गई। वल बनीन, और बेटे औलाद, वल कनातीरिल मुकंतराते, जमा किए हुए खजाने, मिनत ज़हाब, सोने के, वल फिज़्ज़ा, सोने चांदी के खजाने, माल दौलत की मोहब्बत एक नेचुरल इंसान में मौजूद है। वल खैलिल मुसव्वमते, और निशान ज़दा घोड़े। उस ज़माने में जब ये कुरान नाज़िल हो रहा था उस वक्त तो अच्छे घोड़े, खूबसूरत घोड़े बहुत बड़ी दौलत थी। अब भी वो सवारियां हैं, अब गाड़ियां हैं, मोहब्बत होती है इंसान को। वल अनाम, और जानवर रखे हुए हैं, ऊँट रखे हुए हैं। वल हर्स, और खेती। ये सारी चीज़ों की मोहब्बत अल्लाह पाक है इंसान के दिलों में डाल दी गई है, अल्लाह की तरफ से ये फितरत में डाल दी गई है। लेकिन अल्लाह पाक ज़ालिका मताउल हयात दुनिया, ये दुनिया गुजारने की एक मता है, ये दुनिया का माल और दौलत है। लेकिन असली जो है इस सारी दौलत को, ये मोहब्बत यकीनन है, लेकिन वल्लाहु इंदहु हुस्नुल मआब, ये याद रहे कि असली ठिकाना तो अल्लाह के पास है। इन सारी चीज़ों को मुनासिब तरीके से अल्लाह के अहकामात के मुताबिक इस्तेमाल करके हमने जाना है। ये सारी चीज़ें ये दुनिया की ज़िंदगी का सामान है, ठीक चीज़ें हैं साथ ही, इनमें कोई मना नहीं है, लेकिन नज़र हमारी आखिरत पर हो कि हमने आखिरत में जाना है, और उस पर मुनासिब क्या है कि अल्लाह के अहकामात को ठीक तरीके से पूरा करना है। इन सारी चीज़ों को हमने इस्तेमाल करना है। इनकी मोहब्बत कोई मना नहीं है, जायज़ है, जायज़ तरीक़ों के साथ इनकी मोहब्बत जायज़ है। अल्लाह पाक हमें समझ अमल की तौफीक अता फरमाए। So we are going to talk about the long-term control of blood pressure. This long-term control is achieved by the kidneys. We term this mechanism as renal body fluid system control of renal body fluid through the kidneys, renal body fluid system, for the control of arterial pressure, which we are going to. So long-term regulator of the blood pressure is kidney, functions of the kidney. We are going to see how. The nervous mechanism and the intermediate mechanism, they are also involved in the long-term intermediate mechanism, are also, they will continue in the long-term control of the blood pressure as well. But the nervous mechanisms of blood pressure control are not capable of maintaining long-term blood pressure homeostasis. If the blood pressure remains low for longer duration, then the nervous system, they reset. What we term as the nervous system resets to new state. Continuous low blood pressure, nervous system tries to elevate it, but then it will reset to new level. Or if there is elevated blood pressure, if it persists for longer duration, then the nervous system, they reset to this new state of the blood pressure. So nervous system, they adopt. There is receptor adaptation or even nervous adaptation in some cases is there. So long-term control of the blood pressure cannot be the functions of the nervous system. It is long-term regulation is through this, which we are going to talk about today, that is the body fluid control by the kidneys. Body fluid control by the kidney, balance between intake of salt and water and output of salt and water. that is, total volume of the blood will be controlled. If the long-term blood pressure has to be decreased, then the are increased through the kidney. It is the volume which is the kidney is regulating the total blood volume. So balance between the intake and output of the salts and fluid is achieved by the kidney to maintain the normal blood pressure, which we are going to see today. So it is the kidney. Regulation of arterial pressure is primarily by conserving or releasing salts and water. ये दो चीजें. Either if the blood pressure has to be increased, salt should and water should be conserved. It should be, if elevated blood pressure is required, then the salt and water conservation is required. If the blood pressure is to be reduced, then the total volume has to be reduced. That is from the circulation via the kidney to maintain the blood volume according to the requirement. If the blood pressure is to be elevated, volume should be elevated. If the blood pressure is to be reduced, volume should be reduced. So that is this statement we are going to analyze today. When there is increase blood volume, increase extracellular fluid volume, and the blood is the one of the plasma and one of the extracellular fluid volume. If there is increased blood volume, increased extracellular fluid volume, naturally there will be increased blood volume as well. There will be increased blood pressure. This is known because we will discuss it again when we talk about the regulation of cardiac output, etc. in venous return. There is long discussion about that in coming lectures. Inshallah, we will discuss. But it is very simple-minded people that can understand that increased blood volume should increase the blood pressure. So there is increased blood pressure. Kidney, they cause the increase urinary output of salt and water. This is the state. किडनी क्या करते हैं, जब भी ब्लड वॉल्यूम ज्यादा होके ब्लड प्रेशर बढ़ा हुआ है, the kidney will adjust this. They will excrete extra salt and water through in the urine, and the blood pressure will return to the normal. That is, kidney simply excrete extra volume. Extra volume in the blood that is excreted by the kidney. Simply excretion of salt and water to blood pressure, increased blood pressure will return to the normal. So kidney simply excrete extra volume of blood responsible for the increased blood pressure, and extra volume of the blood that is reduced. Or opposite, when the extracellular fluid volume is less, blood volume will be less, blood pressure is also low, then the kidney, the urinary output of salt and water will be reduced. That means retention of salt and water will occur. ये पिछली slide की explanation है, that is kidney के देखा the conservation or release of the salt and water. इसी की हम explain कर रहे हैं इसमें. That is, when the blood pressure is more, the kidney will excrete more salt and water. When the blood pressure is low, and the retention of salt and water will occur, and this will be increased, this will be increased, and the blood pressure will return to the normal. Now, explanation of this: a few millimeter rise in the arterial pressure. If we are applying this on the जो हमने अभी discuss करके हैं उस पे apply करते हैं. If there is rise in the blood pressure, a few millimeter rise in the pressure, there will be increased urinary water loss. यही हमने अभी कहा है. When the blood pressure is more, kidney will excrete extra water. This is known as pressure diuresis. This is simply water लिखा हुआ है फिलहाल. So rise in the pressure will cause a loss of water in the urine. This we term as pressure diuresis. इसको हम क्या कहते हैं? Pressure diuresis. Whenever pressure is more, blood pressure is more, there is more urination, more loss of water in the urine. This is known as pressure diuresis. Plus, this a few millimeter of rise will also cause the more loss of sodium as well. Not only water, sodium is also lost in the urine, and this is termed as the pressure natriuresis. Sodium is also lost and water is also lost. So when there is rise in the pressure, there will be pressure natriuresis, pressure diuresis. What is that? That is, there is more loss of salt and water. more excretion of salt and water will occur, and the blood pressure should return to the normal. And opposite, fall in the arterial pressure will cause the opposite effect, that is decreased urinary water and sodium loss, and it will cause the increased blood volume and blood pressure will return to the normal. So this is known as retention of salt and water. Now this is the very important curve. We will concentrate on the how this curve behaves. Renal function curve, we call it as renal output curve or renal function curve. Yes, renal output curve is better. Renal output curve, renal function में तो और बातें आ गई, that is urea कितना है, creatinine कितनी है, those are known as commonly named as the renal function test, उनको हम कहते हैं. Renal output curve, तो प्रेशर डायूरेसिस भी आप इसको कह सकते हैं, दैट इज आउटपुट ऑफ यूरिन प्लॉटेड अगेंस्ट दी ब्लड प्रेशर. जितना प्रेशर ज्यादा होगा प्रेशर डायूरेसिस विल अकर, दैट्स व्हाई दिस इज नोन एज प्रेशर डायूरेसिस और रीनल आउटपुट कर्व. दिस इज द कर्व, that is you can see with increasing pressure there is the urinary volume output normal के मुकाबले में कितना, that is the blood pressure. The blood pressure is increasing, when the blood pressure is 100 millimeter of mercury it is 1 normal, जितना भी हो अभी हम देखते हैं. So this is renal output curve or renal ROC, renal output curve. Pressure diuresis curve आप कह सकते हैं. What is that? Renal function curve or renal or urinary output curve इसको कह सकते हैं. You can see at 50 millimeter of mercury here, blood pressure, if it is 50 millimeter of mercury, there is no loss of sodium, there is no urination at all, anuria, complete loss, there is no loss of water, complete anuria, absence of urination at 50 millimeter of mercury. And near 60 it starts, and at 100 millimeter of mercury this. At 100 millimeter of mercury, it is at 1 normal. This is the 1 normal. Urinary volume output into normal. 1 normal, whatever the value, that is 1500 ml. Average urinary output volume is 1500 ml, that is taken as 1. So this is 1 normal. At 100 millimeter of mercury, mean arterial pressure, it is normal urinary output. At 200 millimeter of mercury, that last one, that is the urinary output is about 7 to 8 times. 7 to 8 times, 7 or 8, 10 liters of water may be lost if the blood pressure is 200 millimeter of mercury. So increasing pressure causes pressure diuresis. Increasing pressure causes more loss of salt and water, both are present in the urine. So loss of salt and water in the urine, this is the pressure diuresis curve. जितना pressure ज़्यादा होगा उतना ज़्यादा होते जाएगी urinary output, and that will reduce the blood volume. So this is normal renal output curve or normal mechanism of pressure diuresis, we can call it. Pressure diuresis or normal renal output curve, that is at 100 millimeter of mercury, normal salt and water loss in the urine. वो नॉर्मल कितना होता है? नॉर्मल इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर 24 आवर्स, दैट इज बैलेंस. मेरे ब्लड में जितने बॉडी फ्लूइड जितना मैं डेली इनटेक है, दैट शुड बी एक्सक्रीटेड थ्रू मेरी बॉडी से निकलना चाहिए. इनटेक एंड आउटपुट शुड बी बैलेंस, एंड इट इज बैलेंस एट 100 millimeter of mercury in a normal person. So this is normal renal output curve. Now effect of addition of extra fluid, what will happen? If we add extra fluid, we are increasing the extracellular fluid volume, we are increasing the blood volume, we will increase the cardiac output, we will induce pressure diuresis, it will cause the more loss of salt and water till the equilibrium point is achieved, till the normal blood pressure is achieved. That is, these are the three curves. One is the cardiac output curve with the addition of salt, after the addition of salt and water, after the addition of some extra volume of blood. आपने blood डाल दिया है, cardiac output कैसे जाएगा, and the arterial pressure को क्या होगा, urinary output को क्या होगा. This curve, ये Guyton, this curve is from the Guyton, ये आप देख सकते हैं, this is Guyton की diagram है. मेरे ख्याल में ये पहले सबसे ऊपर ये नीचे होना चाहिए, ये कर्व नीचे होने चाहिए थे कि हम ये एक्सप्लेन करते फिर ये एक्सप्लेन करते फिर एनीहाउ. व्हाट इज दैट? nervous. Now this in this experiment, this is experimental graph. एक animal को हमने क्या किया? We blocked the nervous receptors and we add the infusion of 400 ml of blood. Nervous mechanism को block कर दिया. We are going to see the effects of this extra volume on the urinary output and the cardiac output and the arterial pressure. ये साथ होंगे. So infusion of 400 ml of blood in which the nervous receptor, baroreceptor, chemoreceptor have been blocked. Nervous mechanism have been blocked. हमने 400 ml blood दे दिया. So there will be increased blood volume. We have increased it, and this will increase. This will increase the cardiac output. Mean circulatory filling pressure, if you have got some idea, हमने कहीं जिक्र किया था. That is, increased blood volume is going to increase the venous return, and that will increase the cardiac output. Frank-Starling mechanism, simply. Increased blood volume will cause increased cardiac output because increased venous return, increased filling pressure, that will increase the venous return, cardiac output will increase, and this will increase the arterial pressure. जब हमने उनको एक्स्ट्रा ब्लड वॉल्यूम कार्डियक आउटपुट हैज इंक्रीज यहाँ पे दिया, दिस इज द infusion period. ये है what we observe is when we infuse extra volume 400 ml of blood and we will observe increased cardiac output. अगर हम मेजर करें, और simple observation, there will be increased cardiac output will increase the blood pressure. That increased blood pressure, cardiac output, blood pressure is proportional to cardiac output and peripheral resistance. Here we are talking about the cardiac output. When cardiac output is increasing, blood pressure is going to increase. So this blood pressure will increase. और पिछली कर्व पे जाएं, increased pressure will cause pressure diuresis, and this is seen here. That is, this is urinary output. Urinary output will, when the pressure has increased because of this, and this is because of more extra volume we have added, cardiac output has increased, blood pressure has increased, and this causes pressure diuresis. That means more loss of urine. Urinary output has doubled or tripled. Increased pressure causes more urinary output, pressure diuresis, or this will continue. When pressure diuresis occurs, volume will be reduced, that the cardiac output will be reduced, and this arterial pressure will be reduced, and with the passage of time, about यहाँ लिखा हुआ 120 minutes, about after 2 hours, all the levels will return to the normal. That is, this extra addition of salt and water has been excreted out. This added salt and water has been excreted out. So at increased arterial pressure, this will cause the increased urinary output, and this will continue. This urinary output will continue till the blood volume and cardiac output return to the normal, and then the arterial pressure will return to the normal. So water excreted till the restoration of normal. यहाँ पे देखें तकरीबन 2 घंटों बाद, after 120 minutes के बाद, 120 और 1 घंटे बाद, whatever the time is, that is the salt and water have been lost, cardiac output has returned to the normal, arterial pressure will return to the normal, all the urinary output will also return to the normal, will be normal, but again it will again at the normal level. So effect of addition, that's how kidney functions. Pressure diuresis. Now if the kidneys are normal, renal output curve, that is which we have seen is the normal renal output curve, whenever extra volume is there, that will be lost and blood pressure will return to the normal. As the blood pressure increase, blood pressure will return to the normal by the excretion of salt and water by the kidney. Renal body fluid mechanism of control. Now this is again the same curve. ये वही curve है, but with the addition of another line. This is the renal output curve, the same curve. That is pressure के against we have plotted the urinary output. Urinary output कितना है against pressure, and again we say at 100 millimeter of mercury, urinary output is at 1 normal. This is 1. वो curve में यहाँ लिखा हुआ नहीं है, but you can see it. It should be 1 here. So इस लाइन को फिलहाल भूल जाए अगर. This is renal output का जो हमने देख चुकी है. At 100 millimeter of mercury, this is the renal output is 1 normal. What is 1500 ml जो normal आमतौर पर कहते हैं, about 1 liter to 1.5 liter depends upon the total intake. Normal intake is about 1.5 liter intake, and 1.5 liter is the output of the extra salt and water. So it will be 1 normal. This black line is showing us what is this? This is the normal intake of salt and water. This line is showing us the level of salt and water intake. That should be normal. It is one normal. Again, ये इसको भी one normal ही बोले. Amount नहीं, absolute values में figures में amount नहीं कह रहे. One normal, whatever the normal intake of salt and water one person has, and normal output one person has. Both are balanced. That is, the intake of salt and water is whatever. Agar ye 1500 ml hai, then intake of salt and water is also 1500 ml. So both are balanced at 100 millimeter of mercury. If there is increased pressure here, इसी पे देखें, that is renal function curve और salt and water urinary output curve, ये red curve तो वही है, and salt and water intake level are line. This is salt and water intake level or line, that is normal. यहाँ पे one लिख लें, that is one normal. So the normal amount of salt and water intake is equal to normal loss of salt and water. This is loss of diuresis. Salt and water, that is balanced at 100 millimeter of mercury. ये 100 millimeter of mercury पे, say I take 1.5 liter of water, extra water daily, and I take 1.5, I will be excreting 1.5 liter of water in urine. That is balanced. My blood pressure will be maintained at 100 millimeter of mercury. So equilibrium point between normal intake and normal output is at 100 millimeter of mercury in a normal kidney, in a normal person. Normal balance at about 100 millimeter of mercury, which we term as equilibrium point. Now, if blood pressure increases, आगे हम slide देखेंगे. If the blood pressure increases, या हम देखते हैं. इसी को हम दोबारा apply करते हैं. That is at 100 millimeter of mercury, this is the equilibrium point. This we have discussed previous slide. ये वही slide है. At 100 millimeter of mercury, it is the equilibrium point. What is that? That the normal intake of salt and water is intake of salt and water is equal to output. They are at equilibrium at 100 millimeter of mercury. Yeah, you can see. Now the intake and output of salt and water are equal equilibrium point, और किस pressure पर it is at 100 millimeter of mercury. Now what happens if blood pressure increases 150 millimeter of mercury? Yeah, 150 millimeter of mercury output is here. Output is about 4 times. Agreement 4 times हो गया, yeah, less than 4 times. So when the pressure has increased to 150 millimeter of mercury, kidneys are normal, renal output curve is normal. Now what you can see? You can see at this 150 millimeter of mercury, normal kidneys, my kidneys will be excreting this much amount of salt and water. While intake is again the same black line, both a black line hai. Now it is not equilibrium. ये equilibrium नहीं है. Now there is more loss of salt and water, but intake is again the 1500 ml or normal amount of salt and water intake. ये black line तो उधर ही है. Now what is my intake is this much, but the output is 3 times or 4 times. What is meant by intake is only 1 liter, but output is 4 liter. So what is happening? More loss of pressure, diuresis is taking, more loss of salt and water is going on, and the blood pressure will be reduced. When person is losing extra salt and water, when the person is losing water, blood volume is being reduced, so blood pressure will be reduced. जब ज़्यादा loss हो गया, blood pressure will be 140, 120, 110, till this is 100. जब तक नहीं आएगा, this will be balance will be in the favor of, it will be in the favor of more excretion. तब तक blood pressure is not at exactly at 100 millimeter of mercury. 150, 149, 150, 140, 130, there is more excretion of salt and water than intake. Intake तो उतना ही है. So this is the equilibrium point. जब तक equilibrium point, that is at 100 millimeter of mercury pressure नहीं आ जाता, the output will be more. Output will be more. It is 110 millimeter of mercury, output will be more than the intake. So equilibrium. till the equilibrium point. So more loss of water and salt than intake will continue till the equilibrium point. Salt and water excretion will continue till the blood pressure falls to the level where both are equal, that is at 100 millimeter of mercury. Equilibrium point तक लाएगा. Equilibrium point normal kidney का 100 millimeter of mercury है. Normal intake salt and water and normal excretion of salt and water is balanced at 100 millimeter of mercury by the normal kidney. ये normal kidney. So the whenever pressure changes, whenever pressure increases, अब फिलहाल हम increase की बात करें. If the pressure has increased, more loss of salt and water will be taking place till the equilibrium point. So this will bring, this kidneys will bring the blood pressure to exactly at equilibrium point, that is 100 millimeter of mercury. Now, if what happens if the pressure falls, if it is 80 millimeter of mercury, somewhere here, this is, yeah, you can see. If the blood pressure it is 80 millimeter of mercury, what is this? This is the pressure diuresis curve is showing us the total loss is much less than the normal intake. Intake is above and output is less. Now output is less, that means intake is more, so there is addition of salt and water. So kidney will be causing a retention of salt and water. That means excretion will be less than intake. Intake is 1 liter and output is only 0.5 liters, say, for example. So it will continue. It continue to conserve salt and water. It will continue to increase salt and water till the equilibrium point, till the pressure is 90 psi it is less and 99 per psi it is less at 100 millimeter of mercury, it will be balanced again. So kidneys will return the low pressure to the normal equilibrium point by conserving salt and water, by increasing the total blood volume and extracellular fluid volume to increase the blood pressure. So that's how kidney regulates the blood pressure. So intake of salt and water more than output till the equilibrium point. So at 80 millimeter of mercury, intake is again वो तो उतनी है जितना खाना है मैंने, but output by the kidney has been reduced. Or at 150, output has been increased and till the equilibrium point. In both conditions, higher pressure kidneys will bring it to the equilibrium point, and lower pressure kidney will bring it to the equilibrium point. That's how the kidneys regulate the blood pressure exactly at 100 millimeter of mercury. There is no backlag here as well. जैसे हमने baroreceptor में देखा था, there may be some exact infinity तक control नहीं है. So this is infinity gain, exactly 100 equilibrium point पे लाएंगे दोनों condition में, चाहे blood pressure ज़्यादा हो रहा हो या कम हो रहा हो. Now, so here we can infer, we can conclude from this discussion determinants of arterial pressure level. कितना होगा arterial pressure? Arterial pressure always remains normal as long as these two factors are normal. That is, renal output curve and salt and water intake are normal. ये दोनों जब तक if a person has got normal kidneys and he has got the normal intake of salt and water, blood pressure will be maintained at that normal equilibrium point, which is 100 millimeter of mercury. So arterial pressure always remains normal as long as the renal output curve and the salt and water intake are normal. खराबी कब होगी? When something wrong with the renal output curve. अगर किडनी खराब हो रहे हैं, renal output curve खराब हो रही है. If the renal output curve is shifted to higher pressure side, equilibrium point 100 पे ना हो, normal intake को वो 110 पे excrete कर सके. If something wrong with the kidney, then the more pressure may be required to excrete normal amount of salt and water. मैं normal जितना खा रहा हूँ 100 पे excrete हो रहा है, किडनी खराब हो जाए 100 पे excrete नहीं होगा, ज़्यादा pressure चाहिए होगा, 110 पे excrete होगा. So, or if I indulge in excessive intake of salt and water, then the equilibrium point must shift. ये भी shift होना चाहिए. So arterial pressure always remains normal as long as the renal output curve and salt and water intake is. So arterial pressure only changes if shift of the pressure level of the renal output curve. जैसे अभी example दे रहा था. इफ द रीनल आउटपुट कर्व नॉर्मल रहेगी तो ये नॉर्मल रहेगा। चेंज कब होगा? व्हेन द रीनल आउटपुट कर्व इज शिफ्टेड टू हायर प्रेशर साइड। इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट इज शिफ्टेड टू 110 मिलीमीटर ऑफ मर्करी, उसका प्रेशर फिर 110 रहेगा। So shift of the pressure level of the renal output curve, तब ये खराब। arterial pressure only changes if there is renal output curve is shifted and the change level of salt and water. वो जो ब्लैक लाइन है दैट इज अबव, वो वन नॉर्मल थी 2 कर दो तो देन दैट इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट विल बी शिफ्टेड, वी आर गोइंग टू सी। सो जब तक ये दो फैक्टर्स चेंज नहीं होंगे आर्टीरियल प्रेशर विल रिमेन एट 100 मिलीमीटर ऑफ मर्करी, नॉर्मल लेवल पे रहेगा। These are the two determinants of the long term arterial pressure. Long term arterial pressure किस पे डिपेंड करता है? किडनी की अपनी हालत पे, कितना वो हेल्दी किडनी है, रीनल आउटपुट कर्व कैसी है, अगर नॉर्मल है तो उसको रखेगा नॉर्मल, या इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर नॉर्मल है या नहीं है, वो अब नॉर्मल है तो फिर दैट इफ आई टेक आई हैव गॉट नॉर्मल किडनी है, अगर सॉल्ट एंड वाटर में डबल कर दूंगा तो नॉर्मल को तो 100 मिलीमीटर ऑफ मर्करी पे एक्सट्रीट कर लेगा, बट लेकिन डबल को 110 पे एक्सट्रीट करेगा। वी आर गोइंग टू सी दैट। तो दीज आर द टू डिटरमिनेंट्स, क्या रीनल आउटपुट कर्व का लेवल कैसा है और सॉल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक का लेवल कैसा है। अगर दोनों नॉर्मल है ब्लड प्रेशर विल ऑलवेज रिमेन नॉर्मल, वो नॉर्मल रहेगा। इफेक्ट ऑफ अल्टर्ड रीनल आउटपुट कर्व, पहले हम देखते हैं कि अगर रीनल आउटपुट कर्व जो पहला डिटरमिनेंट है ये रीनल आउटपुट कर्व अगर शिफ्ट हो गई है, अगर वो अल्टर हो गई है, चेंज हो गई है, तो व्हाट विल हैपन? दिस ब्लू कर्व इज द नॉर्मल, पुरानी कर्व है। ये रेड बनाता गाइटन ने, ये भी गलती की हुई है कि वो जो रेड कर्व बना रहा था नॉर्मल कर्व को, इसको भी रेड बनाता, अब रेड को उसने ब्लू नॉर्मल बना दिया। ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड। दिस इज द नॉर्मल कर्व। इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट इज एट 100 मिलीमीटर ऑफ मर्करी। This is normal kidney. If something is wrong with the kidney, that is normal intake of salt and water cannot be excreted by this kidney. Agar if there is something wrong with the kidney, and this much salt and water will be excreted at 160 millimeter of mercury, so something wrong with the kidney. Kidney ki renal output curve has shifted to higher pressure side. Salt and water intake normal रखा हुआ है मैंने, लेकिन मेरे इफ समथिंग रॉन्ग विद द किडनी, आगे वी आर एट द एंड हम देखेंगे व्हाट कैन बी रॉन्ग विद द किडनी, डैमेज टू द किडनी, और विल द एडवांसिंग एज नेफ्रॉन्स हैव बीन necrosis of the may occur, degeneration of the nephron may occur. Anyhow, if the renal output curve of a kidney is not normal, that is the equilibrium point has shifted to 150-160 millimeter of mercury, normal intake of salt and water, but the something wrong with the kidney, the blood pressure will be, equilibrium point is elevated. At that the equilibrium point is at 150-160 millimeter of mercury. Renal output curve is shifted to higher pressure side. Salt and water intake is normal. This is normal, and equilibrium point has shifted to 150 millimeter of mercury. Now in this kidney, ये किडनी में क्यों खराबी है, रीनल आउटपुट कर्व भी ऐसी हो गया, तो दिस पर्सन विल बी हैविंग ब्लड प्रेशर ऑफ 150 मिलीमीटर ऑफ मर्करी। नॉर्मल सॉल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक पर इसका ब्लड किडनीज आर कैन मेंटेन दिस इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट इज शिफ्टेड एट 150 मिलीमीटर, तो किडनी विल इक्विलिब्रियम किडनी तो इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट पे लाते हैं वेयर द इनटेक एंड आउटपुट इज बैलेंस्ड. It is balanced at 150 millimeter of mercury in this abnormal kidney. Something wrong with the kidney. So this is the equilibrium point is shifted to higher pressure side. So arterial pressure will be maintained at this new equilibrium point by equilibrium point of this abnormal kidney, this damaged kidney. ये damaged kidney, this is not normal. So normal output curve खराब हो गई है, तो then the pressure will be wrong. तो इसका pressure will be chronically elevated pressure will be there. So this is one determinant. A long term arterial pressure किस पे डिपेंड करेगा? रीनल आउटपुट कर्व पर. रीनल आउटपुट कर्व नॉर्मल हो तो नॉर्मल होगा, अगर वो एबनॉर्मल होगा तो देन द ब्लड प्रेशर विल बी एबनॉर्मल. नॉर्मल नाउ अब दूसरी चीज को हम चेंज कर दे, साल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक, वो ब्लैक लाइन इन साल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक, ब्लैक लाइन साल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक यहाँ पे नॉर्मल है, हम उसको चेंज करते हैं. दिस इज नॉर्मल रीनल आउटपुट कर्व, वही ब्लू कर्व यार पहले हम रेड देख रहे थे. दिस इज द नॉर्मल रीनल आउटपुट कर्व वेयर द इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट इज एट 100 millimeter of mercury at normal intake of salt and water. Now this is salt and water intake has elevated. This is line has elevated 4 times. 4 times the intake is salt and water intake red line. So salt and water intake is more. So this much salt and water cannot be excreted at 100 millimeter of mercury. This will be excreted at this much, the equilibrium point. Intake and output will be balanced at about 150, 160 millimeter of mercury. So 4 times extra salt and water हम ज्यादा खा रहे हैं, so balance will be achieved at the much higher pressure side. Renal output curve, increased level of salt and water intake, equilibrium point will be 160 milli or 150 millimeter of mercury. So इसमें salt and water intake को जब ज्यादा कर दिया, then this normal kidneys will not be able to excrete this salt and water at 100 millimeter of, they will require 150 160 millimeter of mercury पे ये excrete करेगा. So equilibrium point has shifted to much higher pressure side and the blood pressure will be maintained at that normal equilibrium point. ये तो acute case है, अभी इसको हम आगे देखते हैं. But these are the two determinants of the long blood pressure. Renal output curve अगर वो ठीक रहेगी blood pressure ठीक रहेगा, और salt and water intake ठीक रहेगा blood pressure will remain normal. Blood pressure will be abnormal only if the renal output curve is shifted to high pressure side or the salt and water intake is more than normal. Then the blood pressure will be elevated. We can see. So arterial pressure will be maintained at this new equilibrium point, whatever, 160 millimeter of mercury in this diagram. 160 millimeter of mercury पे pressure maintained रहेगा. This is again very important curve. ये आखिरी कर्व है, लेकिन आगे 2 स्लाइडें हम देखेंगे. दिस इज नॉर्मल रीनल आउटपुट कर्व, वही पिछली जो हमारी आउटपुट कर्व है ये वही है, और ये वो ऊपर वाली साल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक वाली लाइन भी उसी तरह कह रहे, दैट शुड बी शिफ्टेड टू दिस साइड, प्रेशर शुड बी मोर. लेकिन इसमें क्या है, दिस इज एक्यूट कर्व. इफ द ब्लड प्रेशर रिमेन्स एलिवेटेड, क्रॉनिकली एलिवेटेड, it is not renal functions only. There are many other mechanisms which we have discussed in the previous lecture as well. Hormonal mechanism or nervous mechanisms हमने बात की हुई है. वैसे ही है, ये तो हम सिर्फ किडनी की है, ये तो हम बात कर रहे हैं only the role of kidney की बात कर रहे हैं. But the chronic elevation of the blood pressure, normal body में there chronic renal output curve is not like this. This is like this, very steep. What is meant by that? 6 times high intake. Yes, इस diagram में वो तो 4 times intake था पिछली में. This is 6 times normal intake of salt and water and high intake of salt and water. 6 times high intake of salt and water. एक आदमी खाता ही नमक महीनों से सालों से salt water intake ज्यादा है, आउटपुट कर्व उसकी नॉर्मल है, उसको हम नॉर्मल कहें, किडनी उसके ठीक है. सो क्रॉनिक एलिवेटेड ब्लड प्रेशर अगर किसी में रहे ना, क्रॉनिक इन हाई इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर अगर मेंटेन करते हैं हाई ब्लड प्रेशर, देन देयर आर अदर फैक्टर्स व्हिच विल अफेक्ट द रीनल आउटपुट कर्व एज वेल. वो कौन से हो सकते हैं? फॉर एग्जांपल एल्डोस्टेरोन, फॉर एग्जांपल एडीएच. They do contribute toward the excretion of salt and water, aldosterone and ADH. So they will come into play and renal output curve will become very steep. So 6 times more extra intake of salt and water can be handled by the kidneys अगर kidneys normal हो. That is the equilibrium point almost normal के करीब है. क्रॉनिक रीनल आउटपुट का ये तो एक्यूट है ना, एक्यूट हम इंक्रीज कर रहे हैं ब्लड प्रेशर, यूरिनरी आउटपुट कितना ज्यादा हो रहा है या कम हो रहा है, ये तो एक्यूट है ये कर. लेकिन क्रॉनिक एलिवेटेड हाई इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर, देन द किडनी आर कैपेबल ऑफ एक्सक्रीटिंग दिस वेरी हाई इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर. ऑलमोस्ट दे कैन मेंटेन द ब्लड प्रेशर इफ द किडनीज आर नॉर्मल. किडनी नॉर्मल हो, देयर आर अदर मैकेनिज्म, वो मैकेनिज्म अभी हम लिस्ट करने लगे हैं आगे। ये क्रानिक कर्व क्यों इतनी स्टीप हो गई है? एक्यूट कर्व तो ऐसे है, प्रेशर आप बढ़ाते जाएंगे, यूरिनरी आउटपुट बढ़ती जाएगी, जिसको हम प्रेशर डायूरेसिस कहते हैं। यहाँ पे प्रेशर डायूरेसिस क्यों नहीं रही? प्रेशर तो इसमें हाई इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर से प्रेशर बढ़ना चाहिए था, लेकिन ब्लड प्रेशर हैज बीन मेंटेन्ड एट ऑलमोस्ट नॉर्मल, बी पॉइंट और ए पॉइंट तकरीबन नॉर्मल। रीनल आउट, इसका काज क्या है? क्रॉनिक हैंडलिंग ऑफ द बॉडी फ्लूइड्स, उसके लिए देयर इज एडिशन ऑफ मे बी नर्वस सिस्टम में इजाज से क्रॉनिक एलिवेटेड, अगर ब्लड प्रेशर एलिवेट होता है सॉल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक से, सिंपैथेटिक सिस्टम तो इनहिबिट होके इसको ब्लड प्रेशर को कम कर सकता है ना। if the तो वो chronically inhibited sympathetic system will also contribute। अगर ब्लड प्रेशर सॉल्ट एंड वाटर इनटेक ज्यादा है तो हमने ब्लड प्रेशर ज्यादा किया है। बट मोर इंपॉर्टेंट इज हार्मोनल सिस्टम। व्हाट इज दैट? ADH। ADH is the hormone responsible for antidiuresis, prevention of salt and water। So ADH को inhibit कर दें, there will be more loss of salt and water। So the renal output will be it will become more steep if ADH is absent। So increase this extra salt and water intake, this is diagram में, extra salt and water intake will inhibit, this extra volume will inhibit ADH production, and when ADH is absent, pressure diuresis will be become more steep, more loss of water will be occur because of the absence of ADH। किडनी तो इतना काम कर रहा है, लेकिन एडीएच के ऐड होने से किडनी ने ज्यादा एक्सक्रीशन शुरू कर दिया। तो एडीएच जब नहीं होगी, मोर लॉस ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर, अगेन किडनी कर रहे हैं, लेकिन दिस कर्व हैज शिफ्टेड टू दिस लो प्रेशर साइड। एट इवन लो प्रेशर मोर लॉस ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर इज टेकिंग प्लेस बिकॉज ऑफ एब्सेंस ऑफ एडीएच। तो क्रॉनिक एलिवेटेड ब्लड प्रेशर, क्रॉनिक एलिवेटेड इनटेक ऑफ सॉल्ट एंड वाटर may cause the absence of ADH, and absence of ADH will cause the more steep curve। And then aldosterone, the second important hormone, aldosterone is the hormone which is responsible for the conservation of salt and water। So aldosterone, when it is absent, more excretion of salt and water will occur। So extra intake of salt and water will reduce the amount of aldosterone, and absence of aldosterone will cause the again more steep salt and water, more excretion of salt and water because of the aldosterone as well। So this ADH, aldosterone and angiotensin system. Angiotensin system is also responsible for the more aldosterone production and conservation of salt and water. This will be inhibited। So high intake of salt and water, 6 times more increased salt and water will cause inhibition of all these, and it will cause the more steeper curve, renal output curve, and the even 6 times increased salt and water may be handled by the normal kidney। Kidney अगर normal है, they can handle it with the help of these। वो अपनी सलाहियत तो उसकी acute हमने देख ली, but chronic with the addition of these effects on the kidney, they will affect the kidney, and there will be more pressure diuresis, more excretion of salt and water, and this can be handled। 6 times salt intake can be handled, हमने जैसे देखा उस कर्व में। So with the addition of these hormonal factors, this renal output curve, if the kidneys are normal, is shifted to chronic curve is very steep as compared to normal curve। Chronic handling, damaged kidney अगर हो जाए due to any disease, तो ये काम खराब हो जाएगा। That is high level of aldosterone, एक अगर किडनी डैमेज हो, और समथिंग रॉन्ग विद द एल्डोस्टेरोन। हमने पीछे क्या देखा है? हमने यहाँ पे लो लेवल ऑफ एल्डोस्टेरोन हमने पैदा किया है नॉर्मल में। तो अगर एल्डोस्टेरोन है ही ज्यादा उस बंदे में, ओवर सिक्रीशन, प्राइमरी एल्डोस्टेरोनिज्म उसको कहते हैं, कॉन्स डिजीज। तो हाई लेवल ऑफ एल्डोस्टेरोन एंड एंजियोटेंसिन, तो ये काम नहीं कर सकेगा, क्रॉनिक हैंडलिंग मुश्किल हो जाएगी। And our damaged kidney may not be able to handle वो 6 times increase। तो उसमें अगर damaged kidney है, या if some person has got the more angiotensin production or more aldosterone production abnormally high, then the kidneys are not able to handle जो chronic handling हमने देखी, 6 times को भी handle कर सकता है। Blood pressure will increase with more salt and water intake। वो तो 6 टाइम, नॉर्मल आदमी तो 6 टाइम खा के भी ब्लड प्रेशर इज मेंटेन एट नॉर्मल। लेकिन अगर ये दोनों खराब हों, एल्डोस्टेरोन एंजियोटेंसिन सिस्टम खराब हो या किडनी डैमेज हो, तो salt sensitive people, so these people will be salt sensitive. Normal people 6 times more increase खा के भी उसको हैंडल कर लेते हैं। और अगर ये साल्ट सेंसिटिव है, थोड़ा सा साल्ट ज्यादा किया नहीं तो ब्लड प्रेशर एलिवेट। यू मस्ट हैव सीन कि बाद लोग थोड़ा सा नमक ज्यादा खा रहे हैं, उनका ब्लड प्रेशर एलिवेटेड, दे आर साल्ट इंसेंसिटिव, something wrong with the kidney, something wrong with the aldosterone angiotensin system. So hypertension will occur if extra salt and water is taken by these people, salt sensitive people. Salt sensitiveness, over secretion of aldosterone and angiotensin, जैसे मैंने कहा, और इंजरी टू द किडनी, ये दो काम हो। इंजरी टू द किडनी कब हो सकती है, लिस्ट कर देते हैं। हाइपरटेंशन खुद भी किडनी को डैमेज कर सकती है, या डायबिटीज भी किडनी को डैमेज कर सकती है, या रीनल और डिजीजेज, रीनल कोई स्टोन हो, रीनल में इन्फेक्शन हो, नेफ्राइटिस, ग्लोमेरुलोनेफ्राइटिस हो, रीनल डिजीजेस उसमें भी, एंड क्रॉनिक एक्सेसिव इनटेक ऑफ साल्ट एंड वाटर। ये 6 टाइम इंक्रीज अगर खा रहा है बंदा, सालों तक खाता रहे, दिस मे कॉज डैमेज टू द किडनी। किडनी कितना हैंडल करेंगे इसको, कर रहे हैं, बट दे मे फेल। So the extra intake of salt and water may cause the damage to the kidney, and this will add to the salt sensitiveness. Slight increase in the salt and water intake will cause the hypertension. So gradual degeneration of the nephron due to old age. ये हम क्या लिस्ट किया है? Injury to the kidney because of this. With the advancing age, there is some renal damage naturally occurring with the old age. Old age के साथ किडनी के फंक्शन खराब होते रहते हैं। मेरी अगर 71 ईयर एज हो गई है, मेरे किडनी ऐसे नहीं है जैसे यंग लोगों की होती हैं। There is natural degeneration, gradual degeneration of nephron due to old age does occur, and salt sensitiveness increases with the advancing age. उसमें salt का restriction old age में ज़्यादा होनी चाहिए. So all will cause the hypertension due to oversecretion of this or due to damage to the kidney. दोनों की हमने बात कर ली. So there will be hypertension will occur. So next time we will continue this discussion, long-term control of blood pressure 2, second lecture. ये this is a long topic. अभी बहुत सी बातें बाकी हैं long-term control में, किडनी का जो रोल है, we are going to talk. So long-term control of blood pressure, second lecture we will take next time. So thank you very much. Please do subscribe and share my videos. And मैं ज़रा my subscribers या जो सुनने वाले viewers हैं, मैं slow हो गया हूँ इसको अपलोड करने में, इसलिए कि I am waiting for the new entries in the medical colleges. तो on the beginning of the second year classes in Pakistan, जो हमारी क्लासेस आमतौर पर शुरू होती हैं, तो उसके करीब then I will be ज़्यादा तेज़ी से मैं वीडियोस अपलोड करूँगा इंशाल्लाह. But I will continue, inshallah I will upload all the physiological important topics inshallah. Hope you will share and subscribe my page. Thank you very much.